Making it easy, making it fun. Search for your home in the land of the sun. Powered with homes.com, doing it right. With Slice of Florida, dreams ignite. Slice of Florida Realty, sliceofflorida.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Now, if you've ever bought or sold a home or, even just thought about it, you've probably felt like the whole process is this giant maze of hidden costs and endless confusing paperwork. Well, today we are diving into a massive, literal game changer in how real estate transactions are handled. We'll be breaking down a really fascinating overview from Slice of Florida Realty, and it perfectly captures the dramatic shifts that are just sweeping the housing market right now. So let's jump right in and look at exactly how the way we pay for real estate is evolving. Listen to this quote, because it perfectly captures a frustration buyers have been shouting from the rooftops for years. If I'm not using an agent, why should I be paying the same price as someone who is? Right? It isn't just some random complaint. According to our source material, this directly reflects how consumers have felt for a very long time. Buyers would look at their final closing documents and think, wait a second, why am I footing the bill for services I didn't even ask for, let alone actually use? It's a totally logical question, and it points to a deeply rooted historical problem in the industry. So that brings us to Section 1, the old commission trap. Let's take a look at the historical standard. For decades, an automatic 5 to 7% was just an accepted reality. It was baked directly into the purchase price of pretty much every standard home sale. I mean, really think about that for a second. On a decent-sized house, that chunk of change is easily the price of a brand new luxury car, just sliced right off the top, no questions asked. This massive traditional brokerage fee, it wasn't treated as some optional add-on, it was just the standard approach. A huge portion of financial equity was automatically removed, with a cut of it typically being offered out to the buyer's agent. Under this old system, absolutely everyone felt the squeeze. Sellers were watching their hard-earned equity just evaporate, feeling like those sky-high fees were coming directly out of their own pockets. But on the flip side, buyers definitely weren't winning either. A lot of them felt they were actually paying way more for a property than its true market value, simply because those baked-in fees were artificially inflating the final price tag. The big takeaway here? Both the buyer and the seller felt like they were losing out under the traditional standard. Moving right along to Section 2, lawsuits and Florida laws. This is the tipping point.
Look, when enough people feel like a system is fundamentally broken, the pressure is eventually going to boil over. Our source points out that consumers had been loudly declaring the traditional commission system flawed for years. And these weren't just everyday grumblings around the dinner table anymore. They became the actual catalyst for major industry-shaking lawsuits. Those legal actions have recently triggered sweeping, historic changes across the entire real estate landscape. Basically, the old way of doing things was suddenly on trial.
Now, if you happen to be in a market like Florida, things get even more complex. Florida real estate laws have this added layer called transaction representation. What is that? Well, it's a provision that allows brokerages to represent the transaction itself rather than representing you, the individual consumer. Think about what that actually means. You might be sitting there thinking you have this dedicated advocate fighting tooth and nail for your best price. But legally, the brokerage might just be facilitating the paperwork of the deal. It's this crazy layer of legal complexity that often left consumers feeling totally exposed without anyone truly in their corner. Which leads us to Section 3, a transparent new model, brought forward by Slice of Florida Realty. The fundamental takeaway here is that companies are actively listening to the lawsuits and the consumer outrage. Slice of Florida Realty notes that because consumers loudly declared the old system completely broken, they deliberately set out to create a better way. They literally rebuilt their operational model from the ground up to be significantly more transparent and heavily focused on actually being consumer-friendly. They recognize that the days of hidden fees and confusing representation, well, those days are absolutely over. Remember that confusing transaction representation we literally just talked about? Well, here is the crucial alternative, and it's called single agency. This is an option that offers true client representation. It means the agent works directly and exclusively for your best interests. This new model guarantees that sellers are finally given real choices, including the specific option for dedicated, unquestionable advocacy. It's all about bringing honesty and real integrity straight to the front of the relationship. So let's break down the exact mechanics of how this transparent approach actually works out in the real world. First, as we just covered, they offer true client representation through single agency for sellers, meaning you get a real advocate. Second, there is upfront communication with buyers about exactly who the agent works for. No more guessing games, no more legal gray areas. And third, and guys, this is a big one, they offer limited services for buyers at a much lower cost rather than artificially inflating the purchase price of the home just to cover standard fees. It's a very precise, structured breakdown that protects client interests while actively lowering the financial burden on the whole transaction.
All right, final section. Section 4, your real estate choices, the future of housing. The trade-offs of this massive industry shift are actually incredibly clear. Look, the old system was simple, right? You basically just paid the 5 to 7% and didn't ask questions. But it completely lacked transparency and consumer choice. The new system, as Slice of Florida Realty openly acknowledges, is a little more complicated. But why? Because having real choices and true transparency actually requires more upfront explanation. You have to sit down and discuss representation, limited services, and fee structures. But the overwhelming consensus from consumers is that they much prefer this slight increase in complexity if it means they're getting a fairer, more transparent deal. People absolutely did not want the old system anymore. Which leaves us with one final, totally critical question. In the new era of real estate, are you getting the representation you actually deserve? The industry has completely evolved. The laws have changed. The old, incredibly expensive standards have been struck down. So the next time you go to buy or sell a home, remember what we covered today in this explainer. Think critically about your assets. Demand to know exactly who is advocating for you, and never, ever settle for paying inflated fees simply because that's how it's always been done. Thanks for joining me today, and keep asking the right questions.
Making it easy, making it fun. Search for your home in the land of the sun. Powered with homes.com, doing it right. With Slice of Florida, dreams ignite. Slice of Florida Realty, sliceofflorida.com. Making it easy, making it fun.